I'm Thea Reed, 28 years old, and I will never forget the moment I first felt the Pacific mist on my face after waking from the dream that had stolen a month of my life. The air in Astoria, Oregon, has a particular weight to eat, a blend of salt, pine, and the damp, earthy scent of the Columbia River meeting the sea. It's the air I've breathed my whole life, the air I thought I knew. But on that day, as I stood on a small balcony overlooking the churning gray water, it felt entirely new, as if I were learning to breathe all over again. That fresh breath was a quiet rebellion. Just weeks earlier, my family had left me to fade into the sterile silence of a hospital room, convinced my story was over. They believed they could quietly claim my life's work, an environmental algorithm worth millions and, more importantly, a lifetime of my dreams. They thought the quiet daughter, the one who lived in the shadow of her brilliant sister, would simply disappear. But they were wrong. The human spirit, I've learned, is a tide that refuses to be held back by walls of greed or betrayal. It pushes, it erodes, and eventually, it finds its way back to the open sea. This is the story of how I found mine. It all began on a Tuesday in early autumn, the kind of day in Astoria where the fog hangs low over the water, softening the edges of the world. I was driving over the Astoria-Megler Bridge, that magnificent steel spine connecting Oregon to Washington, with a smile so wide it made my cheeks ache. In my briefcase on the passenger seat lay a signed agreement with Terra Pioneer, one of the most respected environmental tech firms in the world. They were acquiring the license for Aegis, my algorithm. Aegis was my soul translated into code. For 6 years, I had poured everything I had into it. It was a predictive system that analyzed coastal erosion patterns with unprecedented accuracy, factoring in tidal shifts, storm surges, and long-term climate data. It was designed to protect communities like mine, communities that live and breathe by the whims of the ocean. The contract was for $8 million. The number was staggering, but it was the validation that truly made my heart soar. My work, born from late nights in my small apartment with the hiss of the rain against the window for company, was going to make a difference. I couldn't wait to tell my family. I pictured their faces, my father's rare, approving nod, my mother's proud smile, and my sister, Serena. I imagined Serena's surprise, maybe even a flash of genuine happiness for me. We'd always had a complicated relationship, but a success this big, I thought, had to be big enough for both of us. Our family home was a handsome craftsman nestled in the hills overlooking the town, a house that always felt more like Serena's stage than my home. She was 4 years older, a whirlwind of charisma and ambition who worked as a senior project manager at the same local tech incubator where I developed Aegis. She was the sun, I was the quiet planet in her orbit. Parents, friends, even teachers had always been drawn to her light, while I found my comfort in the steady, quiet glow of a computer screen. I walked in, the scent of my mother's pot roast filling the air. Serena was at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, a glass of Pinot Noir beside her. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "I did it, Serena," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. I held up the leather-bound folder. Terra Pioneer. They signed. $8 million for Aegis. For a moment, there was silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed unnaturally loud. Serena didn't smile. A strange, tight line formed around her mouth. "Your algorithm?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft. "Well, yes," I said, my smile faltering. "I built it. Every line of code." She set her phone down with a sharp click. "You built it?" "Thea, I'm the one who managed the project. I'm the one who navigated the incubator's politics, who got you the resources, who made the introductions. You sat in your little cave and typed. I made it happen." The venom in her tone was a physical shock. "That's not fair, Serena. Your role was important, but Aegis is my creation. My research, my design." She stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. She was taller than me, and in that moment, she seemed to tower, her shadow falling over me. You've always been like this, she hissed, her voice low and furious. Quietly working away, making everyone think you're so humble, so brilliant. You just wanted to show me up. To finally be better than me at something. No, I whispered, backing away as she advanced. This isn't a competition. It's my career. It's our family's success. We were at the foot of the grand central staircase now. She was inches from my face, her eyes burning with a resentment I'd never fully understood until that moment. It was an ancient, festering wound. You are nothing without me, she spat. Then, she shoved me. It wasn't a playful push. It was a hard, deliberate thrust aimed at my chest. My balance was gone before I could even process it. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the lip of the bottom stair. The world tilted violently. My head struck the sharp edge of the newel post with a sickening crack, and the last thing I saw was the polished wood of the stairs rushing up to meet me as my body tumbled, limp and broken, into darkness. My first sensation upon returning to the world was the rhythmic, gentle beep of a machine somewhere to my right. It was a metronome marking a time I didn't recognize. A thick fog filled my head, blurring thought and memory. I tried to open my eyes, but my lids felt as heavy as stones. A dull, throbbing pain radiated from the back of my skull and a sharper, more insistent ache pulsed from my right leg. Hello? My voice was a dry, and used rasp. A woman in soft-soled shoes appeared at my bedside. Her face was kind, framed by short, gray-streaked hair. You're awake, she said, her voice a gentle murmur. Welcome back. My name is Maria. I'm your nurse. I blinked, trying to clear the fog. The room was pale blue, anonymous. And 4 stands stood silent guard beside me. How long? I managed to ask. Maria's kind eyes held a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Pity, perhaps. You've been with us for almost 4 weeks, she said. You were in a coma. 4 weeks. A month of my life had vanished. My mind reeled, grasping for the last memory. The argument. The staircase. Serena's face, contorted with rage. A cold dread seeped into my bones, deeper than the physical pain. My family, I whispered. My parents? My sister? Maria hesitated, her hands smoothing the crisp white sheet over my legs. It was a small, practiced gesture of comfort that did nothing to soothe the anxiety clawing at my throat. Your parents called a few times, in the first week, she said carefully. But no one has visited. The words didn't compute at first. No one? Not my mother? Not my father? Even if Serena had stayed away out of guilt or fear, surely my parents. Did they say anything? I asked, my voice barely audible. I needed to know. Maria looked towards the window, where a persistent drizzle streaked the glass. She seemed to be choosing her words with immense care. Your father. He spoke with Dr. Sharma early on. He said that you had been unstable. That you were prone to accidents and that this was a terrible shame for the family. A shame. I lay there, staring at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling, each tiny perforation a black hole absorbing my disbelief. I had been lying here, unconscious, my life hanging in the balance, and my family had not only abandoned me, they had framed me as the author of my own misfortune. They had chosen a narrative that protected Serena, that protected their perfect family image, even at the cost of my dignity, my truth. The betrayal was a physical sensation, a cold weight settling in my chest that made it hard to breathe. The pain in my head, the ache in my shattered leg, they were nothing compared to this. This was the amputation of a soul. The days that followed were a long, slow crawl through a landscape of grief and isolation. The hospital room became my world, its 4 pale blue walls a constant reminder of my confinement. My body was a prison, but my mind was a torture chamber, replaying my family's dismissal over and over. I had spent my life trying to earn their love, striving to be seen from behind Serena's dazzling shadow. I thought Aegis would be the achievement they couldn't ignore. Instead, it had become the catalyst for my erasure. I drifted, caught in a limbo of physical therapy and quiet despair. The nurses were kind, their professional compassion a thin blanket against the profound chill of my solitude. They would talk to me about the weather, about the fishing boats coming into the harbor, their chatter a gentle current in the stagnant air of my room. But every time the door opened, a foolish, stubborn part of me would leap with the hope of seeing a familiar face, only to have it crash against the reality of a nurse with a tray or a doctor on their rounds. About a week after I'd woken, Serena appeared. She didn't knock. The door simply swung open and there she was, looking immaculate in a tailored blazer, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. She stood at the foot of my bed, her arms crossed, a look of detached assessment on her face, as if she were inspecting faulty equipment. "So, you're back among the living," she said, her tone devoid of warmth. "You're causing quite a stir, you know. Everyone's so worried." The last words were laced with a sarcasm so fine it was almost invisible. Pain flared in my leg as I shifted, trying to prop myself up on my elbows. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. "Why are you here, Serena?" She took a step closer, her heels clicking softly on the linoleum. Her eyes, the same deep brown as mine, were cold and hard as river stones. "Just wanted to see for myself," she murmured, a faint, cruel smile playing on her lips. "You need to rest, Thea. Focus on getting better. Let everyone else handle the important things." She straightened up, smoothed her blazer, and walked out without a backward glance. Her footsteps echoed down the hall, leaving a silence that was heavier than before. Her words weren't just an empty platitude. They were a warning. Stay out of my way. A chilling certainty began to form in my mind. She wasn't just here to gloat. She was here to ensure her plan was still on track. Later that week, a different visitor brought the truth into sharp, brutal focus. Chloe, my best friend since kindergarten and a fellow coder, slipped into the room, her face etched with worry and frustration. She enveloped me in a gentle hug, her familiar scent of lavender and coffee a balm to my frayed nerves. "I've been trying to get in for days," she whispered, her voice tight with anger. "They kept saying you weren't accepting visitors, that your family had requested privacy." I knew something was wrong. Her presence was a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. I clung to her hand as she sat on the edge of my bed. Then, she delivered the blow. "Thea. You need to know what's happening at work," she began, her gaze steady and serious. "Serena has taken over Aegis. She's telling everyone at the incubator, and she's already been in meetings with Terra Pioneer." My stomach turned to ice. "What do you mean, taken over?" "She's claiming it was a collaborative project all along, that she was the strategic lead and you were the technical support," Chloe said, her disgust evident. "With you incapacitated, she's saying she's the only one who can see it through. She's positioning herself as the sole visionary behind it." The pieces clicked into place. The fall. The abandonment. My parents' story of my instability. Serena's chilling visit. It was all part of a single, monstrous design. She hadn't just pushed me down the stairs in a moment of anger. She had been planning to steal my life's work. The fall had just been her opportunity. That night, fueled by a cold, rising fury, I reached for the tablet the hospital provided. My hands trembled as I navigated to my online banking portal. I needed to see if I could cover some of my own expenses, to reclaim some small piece of control. The page loaded, and a stark red banner flashed across the screen, "Account access restricted." My breath caught. I called the bank's 24-hour line, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. The agent on the other end was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, Ms. Reed," she said, her voice filtered through the small speaker. "There's a court order on your accounts." They've been frozen pending a competency hearing. A competency hearing? I repeated, the words tasting like ash. On what grounds? The petition cites your recent medical trauma and a diagnosis of cognitive impairment, she said, her professional tone doing nothing to soften the blow. Cognitive impairment. Unstable. Incapacitated. My family wasn't just letting me fall, they were digging my grave. A few days later, a man I'd never seen before walked into my room. He was in his late 30s, with thoughtful eyes and a quiet, reassuring presence. He wore a simple tweed jacket that seemed out of place in the sterile hospital environment. Ms. Reed? My name is Marcus Cole, he said, extending a hand. I'm an attorney. I was contacted by your friend, Chloe. She's very concerned. He carried a thick portfolio, and as he sat down, his expression turned grim. He slid a sheaf of legal documents across the bedside table. I think you need to see these. My heart pounded as I read. It was a petition filed in Clatsop County Court. It declared me mentally and physically incapacitated, unable to manage my personal or professional affairs. It requested that temporary conservatorship be granted to my sister, Serena Reed. At the bottom was a signature, a shaky, distorted version of my own. A forgery. These were filed a week after your accident, Marcus said, his voice low and steady. They were used to freeze your assets and to give your sister the legal authority to take control of your contract with Terra Pioneer. I stared at him, my mind struggling to absorb the sheer, calculated cruelty of it all. How did they do this so fast? How could a judge approve this without me even being awake? Marcus's gaze was direct. They used your medical records. Or rather, a version of them. That afternoon, he arranged for me to meet with my primary physician, Dr. Anya Sharma. She was a woman in her 50s, with a calm, no-nonsense demeanor that I had always found comforting. She entered my room holding a tablet, her face set with a deep, professional anger. Thea, I'm so sorry, she began, her voice tight. I reviewed your chart after Mr. Cole contacted me. Someone with high-level administrative access went into your file while you were in the ICU. They altered the initial diagnostic notes. She showed me the screen. There were entries I'd never seen, detailing exaggerated neurological deficits, notes about prolonged sedation that didn't match the pharmacy logs, and a prognosis that suggested a high probability of permanent cognitive damage. This is a fabrication, Dr. Sharma said, her eyes flashing. It paints a picture of someone who might never fully recover. It's a fraudulent medical record, clearly designed to support a legal petition to have you declared incompetent. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. This was no longer just about greed. This was an attempt to methodically, legally, and medically erase me. As I lay there, the doctor and the lawyer my only allies in a world that had turned upside down, memories began to surface like debris from a shipwreck. I saw Serena at 10, convincing our parents that it was my fault her prize-winning diorama was ruined, when I knew she had knocked it over herself. I saw her at 16, borrowing my carefully saved money for a concert ticket and then telling our father I had carelessly lost it, earning me a lecture on responsibility while she went to the show. I remembered my mother always saying, Serena just has such a strong personality, Thea. You need to be more assertive. And my father, always distant, praising Serena's business acumen while dismissing my passion for coding as a hobby. They had never seen me. Not really. They saw only what fit their narrative, Serena, the star, and me, the quiet, compliant, and ultimately forgettable backdrop. Aegis was my rebellion, my quiet shout to be seen. And in response, they had orchestrated this, the ultimate act of silencing. I looked at Marcus, then at Dr. Sharma. Their faces were mirrors of resolve. They saw me. They believed me. I handed the forged papers back to my lawyer, my hand surprisingly steady. The fog of grief was beginning to burn away, replaced by the clear, cold fire of determination. They think I'm broken, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. Let's show them how wrong they are. My first act of defiance was checking myself out of the hospital. It was against medical advice, but staying in that room felt like remaining a patient in their narrative. Marcus helped me find a small, furnished apartment on the waterfront, a neutral space where I could heal and plan. From my window, I could watch the massive cargo ships navigate the treacherous mouth of the Columbia River, a constant, powerful reminder that even the greatest obstacles could be overcome with skill and persistence. My strategy had to be as meticulous as their deception. My word against my family's wouldn't be enough. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed Serena to condemn herself. Knowing her arrogance was her greatest weakness, I called her. I pitched my voice to sound weak, fragile, and confused. I told her I wanted to talk, to understand what was happening. I suggested a quiet cafe downtown, a place where we wouldn't be overheard. I arrived early, my leg aching in its heavy brace, a tiny digital recorder tucked into the pocket of my coat. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and resolve. She swept in a few minutes later, ordering a latte with an air of impatient magnanimity. "You're looking better than I expected," she said, her tone dripping with false concern. I played my part, the broken little sister. "I'm still so confused, Serena," I said, letting a tremor enter my voice. "Everything is a blur. The contract. Terra Pioneer. People are saying you're in charge now." A self-satisfied smirk touched her lips. She leaned back in her chair, confident. "Someone had to step in, Thea. You weren't exactly in a position to manage an $8 million deal. I'm protecting your interests. Our family's interests." "My interests?" I pressed gently. "But it's my algorithm." Her patience snapped. The mask of compassion fell away, revealing the cold contempt beneath. "Oh, grow up," she said, her voice dropping to a low, dismissive hiss. "It's mine now. It's better this way. I have the vision to take it global. You would have just kept it as your little pet project. Be grateful I'm turning it into a real legacy." I felt a surge of icy triumph. The recorder in my pocket was capturing every self-incriminating word. She had just admitted it. With the recording secured, Marcus's team went to work. He hired a forensic accountant who, within days, uncovered a digital paper trail. Serena had created a new corporate entity under a name strikingly similar to mine and had begun the process of transferring the Aegis intellectual property. More damningly, he found a series of encrypted emails between Serena and a senior administrator at the Hospitala man she had apparently dated years ago. The emails laid out the plan in chilling detail. He would alter my medical records in exchange for a percentage of the contract's first-year earnings. Meanwhile, Chloe was my eyes and ears inside the tech incubator. She forwarded me a chain of emails Serena had sent to the board and to our contacts at Terra Pioneer. In them, she spoke of my tragic and permanent decline and presented a roadmap for Aegis's future that was entirely her own, skillfully writing me out of my own story. Each email was another nail in the coffin she had built for me. Armed with a mountain of evidence, the recording, the financial records, the emails, and a sworn affidavit from Dr. Sharma detailing the medical fraud, Marcus filed our lawsuit. We weren't just seeking to nullify the conservatorship, we were suing for fraud, conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The news of the lawsuit sent a shockwave through our small community. Suddenly, the narrative my family had so carefully constructed began to crumble. Friends who had offered them sympathy now looked at them with suspicion. The battle was no longer being fought in the shadows. It was about to be fought in a court of law. I spent the weeks leading up to the trial in quiet preparation. Marcus and I went over every piece of evidence, every likely question. But my real preparation happened alone, in my small apartment overlooking the river. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed that if she just worked hard enough, was quiet enough, was good enough, she would finally earn a place in her own family. I mourned for that girl and the innocence she had lost. But I also found a new strength rising in her, Placia, strength forged not in the pursuit of approval, but in the fight for my own truth. The pain of their betrayal was still a raw, open wound. There were nights I would wake up, my heart aching with a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight. But with each sunrise, watching the light spread across the water, my resolve hardened. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. I was taking back my work, my name, and my future. The Clatsop County Courthouse is a historic building, its corridors lined with dark wood that seems to have absorbed a century of human drama. On the day of the trial, the air inside was thick with a tense, expectant silence. I sat beside Marcus, my hands clasped in my lap to still their trembling. Across the room, my family sat in a tight, defensive cluster. Serena, her face a pale mask of defiance. My mother, twisting a handkerchief in her hands, refusing to meet my eyes. My father, staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched, the patriarch of a crumbling kingdom. Marcus's opening statement was a quiet storm. He methodically laid out the case, not with bombast, but with the cold, hard weight of facts. He started by playing the recording from the cafe. Serena's voice filled the courtroom, clear and chillingly confident. "It's mine now. Be grateful I'm turning it into a real legacy." A visible ripple went through the gallery. My mother flinched as if struck, and my father's stony expression finally cracked. Serena's lawyer jumped to his feet to object, but the judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Eleanor Reed, a coincidence of name that felt like a strange omen, waved him down. "It's admissible. Please continue, Mr. Cole." One by one, Marcus presented the pillars of our case. The forged conservatorship documents with my signature starkly different from my real one. The bank statements showing the creation of Serena's shell company. The chain of emails where she systematically erased my contributions to Aegis. When Dr. Sharma took the stand, her testimony was devastating. With calm, professional clarity, she explained how my medical records had been manipulated. The entries were designed to create a false narrative of severe and likely permanent cognitive impairment, she stated, looking directly at the judge. "It is medical fraud, plain and simple." Finally, it was my turn. As I walked to the stand, using a single crutch for support, I could feel every eye in the room on me. I didn't look at my family. I looked at the judge, at the jury, and I told my story. I spoke of my passion for the coastline, of the years I spent developing Aegis not for money, but out of a deep desire to protect the world I loved. I described the joy of my success, and the confusion and horror of the confrontation that followed. My voice wavered only once, when I described waking up in the hospital, alone. "The deepest injury wasn't the fall," I said, my voice gaining strength. "It was the silence that came after. It was the discovery that the people who were supposed to protect me were actively working to bury me work, my reputation, my future, all while I lay helpless in a hospital bed." I looked at Serena then. Her composure had shattered. Her face was blotchy, her eyes filled with a furious, desperate denial. My parents looked small, shrunken by the weight of their complicity. They had built their world around the myth of their perfect, successful family, and now they were watching it burn to the ground in the stark light of the truth. The verdict came a day later. The judge found in my favor on all counts. The conservatorship was immediately dissolved. Serena was found guilty of fraud and conspiracy. The hospital administrator was also implicated. The financial and legal ramifications were severe. But as the judge read her decision, I didn't feel a rush of victory. I felt a profound, aching sense of release, as if a weight I had been carrying my entire life had finally been lifted. Justice wasn't a celebration, it was a quiet, solemn balancing of the scales. As the court emptied, I remained in my seat for a long time. My family was escorted out, their faces a mixture of disgrace and disbelief. They were no longer the titans of my childhood, but flawed, broken people who had made terrible choices. and I was no longer the quiet girl in their shadow. I had found my own voice, and it was stronger than I had ever imagined. I walked out of the courthouse and into the soft Oregon rain, feeling not cleansed, but ready to begin. In the months that followed the trial, I began the slow, deliberate process of building a new life. The court's judgment was severe. Serena was sentenced to 3 years in a state penitentiary for fraud, a consequence of her ambition that I suspect she never, in her wildest dreams, thought possible. The hospital administrator lost his job and faced his own legal battles. A civil suit, handled by Marcus, resulted in a significant financial settlement from my parents for their role in the conspiracy. The money felt like ash in my hands, a painful symbol of a family bond that had been irrevocably monetized and destroyed. I never spoke to them again. There were no tearful confrontations, no dramatic final words. There was only a quiet, resolute turning away. I sold my share of the family home and used the proceeds, along with a portion of the settlement, to create a new foundation. I called it the Aegis Initiative. Its mission was simple: to provide grants and legal support to independent innovators and creators, especially women in STEM, who face challenges in protecting their intellectual property. My pain would become someone else's shield. The contract with Terra Pioneer was reinstated, this time with my name, and only my name, firmly attached. They were incredibly supportive, their faith in me and my work a healing balm. Aegis was launched, and its impact was immediate, helping coastal towns from Oregon to Maine prepare for the future. Seeing my code at work, protecting people and places, was a deeper satisfaction than any sum of money could provide. I bought a small house for myself, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was modest, with large windows that let in the ever-changing coastal light. It was a space that was entirely my own, filled with books, code, and the gentle quiet of solitude. I learned to walk without the crutch, though a slight limp remained, a physical reminder of the fall that had, in a strange way, allowed me to finally stand on my own. Sometimes, in the evening, I sit on my porch and watch the fog roll in from the sea, blurring the line between the water and the sky. I think about my family, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of distant sorrow. They taught me the hardest and most important lesson of my life, that self-worth cannot be granted by others. It must be built from within, a foundation strong enough to withstand any storm. I don't know if forgiveness will ever be a part of this story. Perhaps some wounds are not meant to heal perfectly, but to be integrated into who we become. What I do know is that I have found a different kind of peace. It's not the peace of a life without scars, but the peace of a life lived authentically, on one's own terms. The tide comes in, and the tide goes out. It reshapes the coastline, wearing down the stone, carrying away the sand. It is a force of both destruction and creation. I am no longer fighting the current. I have become it. And as I look out at the vast, open horizon, I know, with a certainty that resonates deep in my soul, that my journey is just beginning.